Hello there and welcome to a brand new series that I'm planning on doing. This is Robot Wars Unveiled, and just like Did You Know Doctor Who, this is basically going through a bunch of trivia and facts about certain episodes of Robot Wars in this case as opposed to Doctor Who. So in this very first episode I decided to have a look at, the very first episode, Series 1 Heat A. I hope you enjoy. As many of you know, Robot Wars started off as a series of live shows organised by Mark Thorpe, and this first series was actually assisted by Thorpe himself. In fact, due to the UK series, legal troubles arose and the US 1998 events were cancelled, and many US teams who were offered to appear on the UK series declined as a result of this controversy. The house robots took 10 weeks to be put together, with many of them being created from scrapyard parts and developed by the BBC Special Effects Workshop. The name House Robot actually came from the very first house robot, simply called, House Robot, which was a large orange machine with a 180-degree lifter. It appeared in the 1994 event only. Concept art reveals that there were plans for 9 different house robots. Only a few ended up becoming the house robots we all know and love. But here are the early concepts and their names. First is Evildoer, who would become Matilda, Shove, who would become Shunt, Phobia, a flying house robot, the Sentinels, which were a clusterbot house robot appearing humanoid, Hammerhead, a shark-like house robot with saw blade wheels, a Taste of Chaos, spelled with a K, whose design would eventually become Sergeant Bash, Ek, a large animal-like robot, also known as the Rat, and Powermosh, which perhaps was an early design idea for Sekilot, as well as Steel Slammer, which was a free-wheeled robot with chains. For the first wars, Roboteers had to apply by mid-October of 1997, and then they would have to attend auditions to see how they worked. At the auditions, Nemesis didn't have its iconic fur and was a large silver hockey putt. It was because of its boring look that Team Nemesis opted to make their robot more creative and interesting to stand out. At the auditions, robots would be forced to drive through a chalk outline of the labyrinth trial, with one stock robot, namely Grunt. This is technically Grunt's second appearance in Robot Wars, as the robot appeared in 1995 UK Open, which was the original Robot Wars pilot. There it was a clusterbot. Grunt is also the first ever stock robot to appear. Filming for Series 1 was only in 4 days. The first day was all the team interviews and VTs, the second day was all the gauntlet runs, the third day was all the trials, and the final day was every single battle including the grand final melee. Despite the sumo being the first trial shown, it was in fact the last trial to be filmed. In fact, Nemesis's run was filmed way before Roadblock's run. At the end of the arena semi-final fight between Roadblock and Nemesis, Derek Foxwell tripped over the arena wall, landing a short distance from Nemesis and Matilda, who had been caught on the grill. This incident was cut from the broadcast version, but was shown in a compilation of Series 1 highlights and outtakes in the Robot Wars The First Great War VHS. Roadblock was the first ever robot filmed during a gauntlet run, therefore it was the first ever robot to be filmed in action. This episode was, very obviously, the debut of very many things. It was the first stock robot, the first robot catching fire, the first interchangeable weaponry being used, and the first robot to be flipped over. Team Power behind the robot Barry were disappointed that Grunt, a stock bot, passed through to the trial only to purposely drive off to lose, feeling that they could have gone very well against Shunt. Barry was in fact a super heavyweight. In fact, Roadblock was also over the heavyweight limit. Team Nemesis decorated Nemesis with fur, not knowing that Sergeant Bash existed, thus were caught off guard when they saw the flamethrower and as a result had no idea flame hazards would be a thing. This was because the rules disallowed flamethrowers and the team's believed fur would be safe. Roadblock was originally named Road Rage, however due to recent instances of road rage in the news, the robot was renamed under request from the BBC. The sign on Roadblock was actually stolen from a roadside. Roadblock's sign was originally meant to be painted over, but the team ran out of time, and thus its iconic design stayed. Barry was featured in an advertisement for the first wars, where it was attacked by Matilda. Shogun was the smallest heavyweight robot in the first series. Technically, the Shogun team started the first Gentleman's Agreement, as before its battle with Kilotron, they asked the Kilotron team not to cause too much damage to their robot. Shogun and its team are the only robot, discounting the stock bot Grunt, to never return to Robot Wars. Grunt was technically a middleweight. This marks the only time a house robot acts like a character when Jeremy Clarkson comments about Shunt, and Shunt twitches comedically. Later episodes and seasons would treat the house robots much more seriously. In the introduction sequence, the early concept of Shunt is shown. Similarly, the saw blade is likely to be dead metal, and the chainsaw of Matilda. This means only Sergeant Bash is absent from the introduction sequence. And finally, as many of you know, during filming, Jeremy Clarkson was almost killed when Dead Metal's saw flew off and nearly sliced his head in half. This took place sometime after the third day of filming. And that is it for today. Now, if you've ever seen my Did You Know Doctor Who series, you know that I always do a review of every individual story, and it's going to be no different here for Robot Wars Unveiled. Series 1 Heat A is obviously the very first episode, and it is the one that started it all. Without this episode, we wouldn't have gotten Robot Wars as a whole. And, I'm currently working on another video about another show, and I was saying, if you want to choose your first episode, you need to choose an episode that is really going to wow the audience, that's really going to get people, excited and ready to, watch the rest of the series and, stay motivated. And I think they did a good choice with this episode. They got a great range of robots like Kilotron, Roadblock, Nemesis, all really memorable in their own right. You have a very simplified way of displaying how the show's going to work. You got the gauntlet, then you got a trial, and then you got the arena battles, and the arena battles are probably the best highlight. I've never been a fan of the gauntlet and trial. I never liked them, and series 1, I'll be honest, the gauntlet is pretty piss poor. I mean, robots can literally just go on the far left side and just go straight through. There's barely any problems with that, and really it's only a case of if a robot just breaks down or just gets stuck on something, that's how they lose. I just don't like the gauntlet. The gauntlet kind of sucks. Trials, I've never really been a fan of the trials either. I prefer them as just side events, which is why I liked series 3 and 4 a lot, in terms of the fact that they just used them as side events instead of just full-blown eliminators. Because the problem with the Gauntlet and Trial, in my opinion, is you have robots which could be really good, that could be really destructive, really, amazing in battle, but they get eliminated because they get caught on something on the Gauntlet and they are like 0.1 meter away from the previous one. It just kind of sucks. They get eliminated despite the fact they probably could have done a good fight afterwards, which is why I'm so glad they got rid of this after series 2, because it really was a detriment to a lot of robots and teams. And looking on some of the old forums, you can kind of tell some teams were really pissed off about the Gauntlet and Trial, especially in this particular episode. The Barry team were really upset about losing early on, because there could have been something more interesting as a result. But everything needs a start, and in terms of start, this is a great start. You got a great look at all the house show robots. They all have at least one moment involved in this particular episode, whether it's Matilda slicing over Nemesis, or Sergeant Bash's sword blade just shattering upon making contact with Kilotron, or Shunt, because Shunt at this time was the big nasty house robot, the top dog. And it sort of stayed that way throughout the whole show. Overall, series 1, in my opinion, is a very weak series, but only because, obviously everything needs a start, and, this is a very simplified start. But for Heat A, I think this does a great job, great range of robots, some good battles, and the trials, there are some interesting ones, like the Nemesis one. But overall, it's okay for what it is. So unlike Did You Know Doctor Who, I'll be using a different way to select the next episode, by having every single episode listed and randomly selected. Let's have a look at what is next. So it looks like the celebrity special from series 4 is next. Well, that one might be quite interesting, to say the very least. I'll see you next time.